The reason I have the incredible privilege of being with you this evening is because I was selected as the 2024-2025 Canada Memorial Foundation Scholar. This, with no hyperbole, has been one of the greatest honors of my life. Since entering clinical practice, I've worked as an emergency physician across Canada. I started my career in a level 1 trauma, stroke, and cardiac center in Ottawa, and began providing coverage in single physician sites from PEI and Newfoundland to British Columbia, as well as northern and remote Canada and Yellowknife and Nunavut. In a brief departure from the ED, I spent this past year studying for a Master of Public Policy at the University of Oxford and was delighted to graduate just last week. Thank you. The CMF Scholarship allowed me to join a cohort of 156 students from 61 countries. Now, as a doctor who's already spent over a decade in medical training, you might wonder why I chose to go back to school to study philosophy, economics, and law, among others. The truth is that my everyday work had increasingly convinced me of the importance of public policy in shaping our well-being. I am an ardent supporter of our single-payer universal healthcare system. While not without its flaws, it is Canadian Medicare that allowed my late brother to receive world-class treatment at a leading cancer research center without ever having to worry about our family's ability to pay for it. But there are so many more forces shaping our well-being beyond access to healthcare alone. In 2021, I traveled to Nunavut to provide care for its largely Indigenous population. When I showed up to assist in the surgical theater one morning, I found that the lights were off and I was the only one there. I learned that the water supply had been contaminated by fossil fuel. So not only were the patients who had waited months for their procedures not going to receive them that day, schools and offices would be closed, and the whole community would need to source their own drinking water. As a Canadian from down south, as they say, I was shocked, only to learn that water crises are recurrent in Nunavut, just a few hours from our nation's capital. This inequity is not a direct result of health policy, per se. Instead, it's a consequence of inadequate investment in infrastructure and climate adaptation. Many other inequities persist in the North. For instance, while we technically offer telehealth services in our clinic, only half of First Nations reserves have fast, reliable internet connectivity. This is increasingly provided by satellite systems like Starlink, which has displaced Indigenous-owned and operated internet systems. So having the opportunity to step back and take a broader look at the policy context that shapes our health was among the most valuable parts of my education. For instance, I learned about energy systems from Sir Dieter Helm. He explained that given our ever-increasing global energy consumption, decarbonizing our economy would depend not only on cutting domestic emissions, but also on matching our consumption with carbon price adjustments on imports. From Margrethe Vestager of the European Commission, I learned that it was possible to take a principled approach even to regulating the world's largest technology companies, to ensure at least a degree of competition and to remind the world that, in her words, you cannot be so big that you are above the law. These lessons are worlds away from my usual day-to-day of patient interactions, but they help me understand much more deeply the policies that are and are not in place to keep our country one of the most democratic, stable, and equitable in the world. The truest form of education I gained, though, was from my peers. They brought personal accounts of the civil war in Sudan, the erosion of democracy in Georgia and the United States, and the scale of destruction and deprivation in Palestine. While I always understood that globalization made our countries interdependent, it was their grief and resolve to improve life in their homes that made that abstract understanding a reality. I deeply value my lens as a frontline physician, yet over the course of my studies, my perspective has grown to include interests in energy, security, and climate. One of my favorite lines from narrative medicine comes from Dr. John Berwick, who wrote, "To be a healer is to be responsible for problems you did not cause. The greatest gift the Foundation has granted me is the belief that I might be capable of shaping some of the solutions to those problems as well." Next month, I will return to clinical work, and I am mindful that this transition takes place during a challenging moment in Canadian domestic and foreign policy. We are grappling with Alberta's decision to allow concurrent public and private medical practice, and with Quebec's Bill 2, which seeks to increase regulatory oversight of my physician colleagues. All of this is unfolding in the broader context of Canada expanding its trade relationships and domestic energy production in response to ongoing terror threats. I look forward to taking thoughtful and principled action and helping to navigate these pressures while protecting the health and well-being of our communities. Because of the legacy and generosity of so many of you in this room, I'm better equipped, better prepared, and profoundly inspired to take on that work. So thank you for giving me, my incredible peers here this evening, and so many other scholars the opportunity to imagine a future in which we can serve in many more ways than we ever thought possible.